Hi, everybody. Welcome to Simply SCAdian, no title required. This is Zoph, and you see my awesome compatriot, Lucas. Hi, Lucas.
Hello, Lucas.
And we talk to people who are just like you and me, no titles. We do not talk to anybody who is a peer or a landed or court baron or baroness, because we think that people talk to them all the time. And so we want to talk to people who aren't. Because that's where the cool people are. I don't know. That sounds wrong because cool people are peers too.
True.
I wouldn't know
Yeah.
anything about that though, right? So, um, let's. What were we going to talk about before we introduced Oswin? Are we just going to introduce our
Well, no, we
guest?
talk about since you're talking about the cool people, you know who the cool people are. So if you go to our Facebook page, Simply Scadian, no title required, you can go there, find our form, and nominate yourself, somebody who you feel fits that criteria. We want to talk about everything the SCA has to offer. So it does not matter. No subject is off the table. We'll talk to fighters. We were just talking informally in the green room about cooking and whatnot. So if you know somebody you think we should talk to, again, the only criteria is that they don't have a title yet. They might be on their way to pursuing that. They might decide titles aren't really for them. It doesn't matter. We want to talk to them. We want to hear about them. And
Awesome.
that gets us to tonight's guest.
Woohoo! Awesome dude. Oswin of Bathen is his name. He is currently the Chancellor of the the Royal University of the Mid-Realm, but he is so much more than that. He teaches modern world, does leadership stuff, and he has brought that into the SCA. He makes mead, vinegars. He is keen on Anglo-Saxon things, has gifted a bajillion gifts to people because he's just awesome like that. So here he is. Oswin Abathan, and I'm going to try something new. Well, it's not going to let me. I was going to move you up, but I can't. All right.
Okay.
Hi,
Um,
Oswin. How are you?
Hi, Zoph. Hi, Lucas. I'm good.
How you doing? All right. So how did you find the SCI? That's kind of where we start with people.
Sure.
So what's your experience?
This is gonna be a little take some time because I've been SEA adjacent for many years. Um, so probably 15 years or more ago was technically my first event. It was a Festival of Maidens, which is the big event here in Champaign, Illinois. And friends of ours had invited us to go because they were part of the group, and I embarrassed myself so badly that I distanced myself from the SCA for many years after that. And we can talk about the embarrassing part in a minute, but let's just work up to present day. But my wife's law school friend's wife was, I think, the seneschal for a period of time of our local group. So a lot of this Shire stuff lived in our basement. And then we did Ren fairs and things like that. Um, then about 7 years ago, we decided we were going to up our Ren fair game. We were going to make our own clothes. We were going to try to be more authentic that way. And we're struggling a little bit. And we're like, okay, who do we know who knows how to do these things? Oh yeah, the SCAdians know how to do these things. And then our house burned to the ground.
Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah, go ahead.
So
Oh,
pretty much about roughly a month after we decided, okay, we're going to try to get more involved with the local group, and we wanted to learn more about costuming and various things. Our house, we had a devastating house fire. Just it was an accidental thing, but we lost everything, and the house did burn down to the frame. So we have a fire hardened frame now to the new house. Um, and the local SCAdian group just stepped up in an amazing way. They barely knew us. Well, some of them knew us pretty well, but the group as a whole didn't really know us very well. Meals, and they organized, fundraiser from various other SCAdians, and just all this outpouring of support. And that is where it cemented it for me. I'm like, okay, a group of people who really don't know you are willing to come to your rescue. That's the kind of group I would like to belong to. And so we got more active. Now, my wife's work schedule makes it a little strange sometimes for her to be able to go to everything, but I go to as many things as I can. And it's been 7 years about since then, so it's
Nice.
been pretty good.
So I promise we're not going to talk a lot about rum
Sure.
because I know that that's not the only thing you're known for. But I do want to ask what that transition was like for you when we hit the pandemic,
Hmm.
what it meant as Chancellor of the Royal University of the Mid-Realm, what that meant for you.
It was just like all the rest of us. It was like, what are we doing? How do we do it? Um, we had a So for those who don't know, because I know you have more than just mid-realmers who are watching, um, Brum usually does 2 events a year. We do a martial event in the spring, and then we do an academic event in the fall. That was our normal schedule. So we had the martial rum ready to go for March, late March, and all the events were canceled. I'm like, okay, that's off the board. We had no idea when things were going to be open. I know some of us were optimistic that, hey, maybe it's going to go away quickly. More of us were not optimistic. We understood it was a longer term thing. And then the suggestion was raised, can't we just do classes online? Can't we find people who are willing to teach? And we adopted basically a everyday model. We've slacked that back a little bit, but we started off every day we did a class. And what was the transition was like, I'm not that techie. I'm not a very techie person. So I had to rely on my staff and people who could volunteer. What platform do we use? How do we run it? What securities do we have, if any? And really, it's just been running a year-long event, basically, is what's been happening for me so far. But the staff has been amazing, and the reception's been pretty good. But it's
You've
not
got to be
something.
exhausted. You've
Well,
just got to be exhausted at this point.
some people wanted to keep going, and I get that. I understand that. It allows for, those who have mobility problems or travel problems. You can be part of the community, and I love that, and I get that. But I think the model we did is not the best model.
It's
Other
not
universities,
sustainable. Is that a good
yeah,
word to
yeah,
use?
yeah. That's my
Yeah.
opinion.
I mean,
Like Atlantia does. Go ahead.
did you find that it was there ever a period it lost momentum, or I mean, and then how did you, I
Mm,
mean, have you kept that everyday model since you started?
So we basically, I can't remember exactly what day we started, but it was middle of March in 2020 we started. It was every
Wow.
day and twice on Sunday, literally. Um, in June, I think we transitioned to 4 days a week with one class, and then it was basically 3 weeks on, 1 week off, and that's where we've been since then to now. Has it lost its momentum? It's hit or miss. Well, feast or famine, really. Sometimes you put the call out and everyone's like, yeah, I want to teach, and boom, you've got a full schedule. Sometimes it's I'm pounding on doors, going to people I know. Do you know someone who wants to teach? Can you, or specifically asking them, can you please teach this class? And what works. So yeah, I think like I said, I think the model other universities are using, like Atlantia, they're doing one day. It's a 1 day virtual event, and it fits with what the old expectation was. It'll transition back to in-person better.
Go ahead, Lucas.
Yeah, I just before we leave
Yeah.
Rome, I had a question in general about putting together universities. Again, because my perspective is the new guy. What is the criteria you look for when you ask somebody to teach a class? And then in having a criteria like the knowledge base of that person, then do you require, because like again, I'm a high school teacher in my real life, and I do lesson plans, and I had to prove that I'm knowledgeable in my subject and whatnot. And as somebody who's casually taking classes, some have been great and some I haven't really understood what their focus was. um like, I just, how do you get into the process? Like, what are you looking for?
Well, there was an online discussion about that only a couple days ago. We don't really have a lot of criteria, and that's true of many SCA classes. And because the reality is you're often looking for anyone who is willing. That being said, you do develop a reputation out over time. Do they know what they're talking about? And ways that were suggested to do that. One, if you start a class, do a few minutes on, this is who I am, this is why I know what I know, and why you should at least listen to what I have to say about that topic. That helps establish some credentials. Having good references and some bibliography in your class also helps. It's like, it's not just me saying this, famous so-and-so said it too, and I'm using their work. But it's a skill like anything else too. My first class that I ever taught, I very quickly learned I did not know what I was talking about. I found out I was actually wrong, I mean, factually totally wrong. But it takes experience to go, wow, my research wasn't up to snuff. I thought I knew something, and then as I learned more, nope, I was wrong. I did not have the right research. So we don't have a lot of criteria is the answer, but when I go to somebody, I know I'm going to somebody. Like I could go, so can you go teach about, can you do your peer quality class for me? Or can you do one of your Shakespeare classes? Because I know that she knows what she's talking about.
So. Okay, we promised we wouldn't talk too much about rum. So I want to ask the question that's on everybody's mind right now. Tell us about your frog.
This is Froderick. And Froderick, I learned doesn't talk. That was something I had to figure out. He doesn't have a voice. He doesn't even have an internal voice in my head. He doesn't talk. It all started with one of my Shire mates does research on fox genomes. And so she has a little stuffed fox that she takes around with her to all in the world, she went to Iceland and he went through a museum and stuff. His name is Olaf. So if Refna is watching and Olaf is there, hi Olaf. And that was kind of cool to see the world through Olaf's eyes. And then one of the Penzics that I didn't go to, one of my housemates, his tunic went to Penzic ahead of him because it needed some repair work done. And the household took the tunic around to various spots in Penzic and took pictures of the tunic doing things without the owner inside of it. And again, that was kind of fun. And I'm like, okay, I have this stuffed frog that I just bought on a lark at a garage sale. I'm going to bring that into my play. And you've been on my blog, Lucas, so I know you've seen it, and others, you're welcome to go see Froderick's pictures on my blog. I thought it was fun to see the world through Froderick's eyes. What does he see? What does he think and use that as a showcase instead of just taking selfies with everybody. Here's this person doing this thing and Froderick is watching them, or Froderick is part of the action. And I enjoy it. Some people seem to enjoy watching Froderick, but yes, in playing with other people who do some puppet kind of things, I've learned that Froderick doesn't have a voice. He doesn't talk.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that's really awesome.
I love it. I mean, I think it's cool. So we had, so for our audience, Oswin was going to use a virtual background, but Froderick did not blend in. He absolutely, completely blended in actually with the background. So we have no background because Froderick is the secondary star of today's show.
And I usually carry Froderick, I'll try to get him in the camera, carry him around like this, folded up. And he does interact with hand movements and stuff, but he doesn't talk. And when he's cooperating, I just can shove him into my hood and he walks around. I do have one time, and people are welcome to do this with this caveat, that someone took Froderick and played hide and seek with him. And if you know me and we're at events, you can do that as long as Froderick comes back at the end of the event.
Got it.
One crystal ball for those who know that event. Baron Okami and Baroness Petrona hijacked Froderick and put him up on the diet on the presence, and I didn't notice him for a while.
So the thing that you love to do is meads, cordials, I assume, vinegars. Vinegars are the big thing on your blog that you talk about.
Yeah,
What got you into that?
It's actually the cordials that started it. So let's start there.
That is always the starter for people.
Well, it's easy,
right?
Really. Yeah.
So I was going to say, can you break down because I do infusions, but I don't know that's necessarily a cordial. So what's the?
Sure. So cordials are a sweetened liqueur, basically. I do a whole series of classes on cordials and cordial making. I got into it because after the fire, a lot of things for me are going to be pre-fire, post-fire. Right after the fire, our first major event was the rum Ethel Mark university that was run in Cleveland. That was maybe 7 years back now. So here we're living in a rental house. We just started doing SK stuff. I'm like, all right, what can I do that's relatively cheap and I can do in this small space, because it's a rental that we're living in while our house is rebuilt. And I took some classes on doing cordials. I'm like, okay, I could do that. And I made cordials out of everything I could think of. So it's liquor, usually with some additional flavoring, depending on what you like. You can do almost anything. And then some sweetener, and thyme. Thyme being chronological, not the herb.
Yeah.
And it comes together and you have a sweet drink. Some people like it, some people don't. I ended up with a whole bunch of small amounts of alcohol, because you usually end up with dregs of something. You can give away a lot, but you end up with a little bit. Like, what can I do with all this stuff? And then I started thinking about vinegar, because it's one of those things that when you see it in a recipe, even in a SCAdian recipe, you go, and take vinegar. And your first impulse is, oh, vinegar's vinegar. You don't think about it. You don't give it a lot of thought. Well, what vinegar did they have in this place when they made this recipe? What was that vinegar made from?
Mm-hmm.
White distilled vinegar, no, that's not going to work. Apple cider vinegar, maybe. So I'm like, okay, let's show one, how easy this is, but also dive into, these are the kinds of vinegar. This is how you make it. This is what that region would have had. Now, how's your recipe work now? Your Italian recipe that's looking for, maybe a nice red wine vinegar is going to be one thing. Your English hearty stew recipe that has some vinegar in it, well, that's probably an ale. That's probably made out of beer, not made out of wine. How's that change? Just wanted people to think about it. And then, I don't know, I can't really explain it beyond that. Vinegar just, it's took over.
So how do you make vinegar? Like real basic,
Sure.
lay it out for me.
Well, it'll do it by as long as your alcohol's below 20%, it'll do it by itself. The wild bacteria is already in the air. It's in your lungs. It's all over the place. You can't get rid of it. So it will happen on its own. But basically, you take alcohol, you dilute it enough so that it's going to happen. It likes to be below 10%. Below 10%, good luck stopping it. Between 10 and 20, sometimes you have to play with it. It's an aerobic process, so you have to make sure it's exposed to the air. And then time, again, is what the bacteria eats the alcohol, turns it into acid. That can take a lot of time or a little bit of time, depending on how aerated everything is. And after a while, you've got vinegar.
So what's your big, how do I word this? I don't want to say what have you learned, but what's your big takeaway? Like what's the big thing if you had to sum up vinegar and your experience making vinegar and what you've learned about vinegar in a minute or less, what would you say to people to get them excited about vinegar?
It's easy but subtly complex. If it's something you just want to, hey, I want to make something quick and have around, great, you can do that. And I have another reason I went to vinegars, and I'm going to go over a minute. Whereas I had people who would not take a cordial for whatever reason, I don't drink, I don't like sweet things, whatever. I have yet to find a cook who will turn down vinegar.
Right?
I show up at an event with quarts of vinegar and go back to the feast staff and say, hey, you guys have a use for this? I'm like, yes, please. And they unscrew the cap before I walk out the door. So, but there can be a lot of complexity to it. Before the 1800s, yes, vinegar is common and it's easy, but it was time consuming.
Mm-hmm.
Once you get pasteurization and you can get generator methods of making vinegar, now it's fast. It's very fast. But prior to that, it took time. and it was a commodity. It was something that was bought and sold and transported. And you go, this is just vinegar. Now, modernly, it's $1 for a gallon.
How far down the rabbit hole historically have you gone with your research for it?
Pretty far.
Yeah.
I have 2 more or less permanent processes going. There's the big medieval process is called the Orleans process, where you basically just take a giant barrel, you drill 2 holes in the top in the barrel heads, so you get airflow, and it would be full of cheap or old wine, whatever. Over time, that's going to turn to vinegar. You pour off 80% of it, and then you put new wine in the top. Now you're making vinegar constantly. It's named the Orleans process because it was done in Orleans. So Burgundy, where a lot of our fine wines come from, and eventually where our fine mustards come from, Dijon mustard. All 3 of those industries are intimately connected. And so that's the one process. And then the other is called the Solera process. You were looking at bourbon earlier, Lucas. So a lot of your fine bourbons, scotches, whiskeys are done in a blended process. This is similar to the Solera process, where you have a row of barrels on the bottom that are very old, full of old liquid. Then you have a layer on top of that that's a little younger, a layer on top of that's a little younger. You can go as high with this as you like. After a period of time, let's say 10 years, we're doing a really nice scotch, right? You pour off a third of that bottom barrel and you refill all the barrels from the ones above it now. So you're blending different ages of liquid into that bottom barrel, letting them mix for a period of time. And now you've got a superior product that you can take to market. Vinegar does the same thing. Your sherry vinegar, for instance, this is the process that your good sherry vinegars are made in the Solera. Nice. So I've got 2 Soleras running now too. And the pandemic has been a problem for my vinegar production because I normally give it away, but we don't have events. So I've got close to 20 some gallons of vinegar in my house. I know where to put it.
I had a question. I wanted to take us on a different tack right now. But Lucas, did you have anything that you wanted to ask? Because you have your I'm excited about this subject face.
Yeah, we can keep going.
Well, you know what it is I just want to lead it back because again, I'm thinking about the blog, and I don't know that we would talk about this right now, but you said give it away, and then that reminded me of again some of your recent posts, especially as I was kind of rehashing tonight. You do vinegar as favors. Yes,
I did. I recently, over the pandemic, I was doing fused glass. That's another hobby of mine. It's not the SCAdian hobby.
And I wanted to talk about that too.
Can.
So whenever we get back to that, but yeah.
My access to do fused glass has gotten very limited. I rely on my local glass shop to use their kiln. For reasons related to the fire, I can't have a kiln in my house. And I don't have the time or means to fashion a workshop in my garage yet. So my access to that kiln has gone down a lot. So I wanted to move away from fused glass. It was getting expensive and, like I said, difficult. And I hit on, well, people know that I make vinegar, who know me well and see me around. What if I make little vials of vinegar and I put labels on them, and you saw it on my log, I've waxed the tops of them now so they're sealed.
Yeah, it's an 1/8 dram, right?
Yes, it's an 1/8 dram. So roughly a teaspoon and a half. So anyway, I thought that would be really cool. And I wanted it to make sure it had the name on it because I have a lot of favors from other people. And some of them, I don't remember who gave them to me. So with the label on it, with my name on it, but also good job, making sure they know what's in it. Should they ever need to know what's in it, you break it and you get it on something, whatever. I'm like, I think if you got that as an artist, someone saying, hey, great, good job, here's my favor, so you have a physical representation of that, I think you would like that. And that seems to be what people have said when they've seen the favor.
So I have to interrupt. I messed up when I went live. We went live to my page, not my personal Zoph page. So I've just shared that with everybody on the Simply SCAdian page. So, but don't forget, everybody, we will have a YouTube video up tomorrow that I'll post, and we can share that everywhere. I apologize for hitting the wrong button because I was so like geeked out that we were talking and I didn't take the time I needed to prepare correctly to go live. So
But I do want to
sorry.
circle back to a second half of the question you guys asked, because
Sure.
we
Go
talked
ahead.
about vinegar. Where else have I gone? That's why I've done a lot of the brewing I've done now too. It's fine for me to take a bottle of wine that I buy and make it into vinegar. What's the step back? Okay, I'll buy the grape juice and make the wine. Putting in grapevines, I've definitely thought about it, but that's not likely. I probably will put in apple trees. So, I've made cider from juice I bought. I've made cider from apples I bought. I've pressed the apples. Now I can plant the trees and press the apples. So that's part of, I think, my mindset with all of this is, okay, I've done that and I'm confident I can do that. What's the next step back? How can I get it closer and closer to whatever period practice might have been?
I was going to say, do you think that's important then for people coming into the SCA? To again, because that's kind of what the show's about, is that understanding that there's a place to jump in, there's some place to go in and learn about the process, whatever your field is
Mhm.
here, and become good at it, and then take that step. I've never heard somebody say, and then take that step back, and I kind of love that, because I feel like sometimes people want you to have as much knowledge as they do based on their time in, but not everybody's got the same entry point.
Yes. And it's not a large problem, but it's enough of a problem. We've all heard stories, right? We've all heard the stories of someone saying, hey, I know you, unsolicited advice is what it comes down to. And I do bits on that on feedback and giving advice. So yes, I think people do need to realize, start with whatever you think is cool. You want to do modern acrylic knitting, start there. And then when you're ready, there are people who can help you take that step back if you are not able to figure it out on your own or you get stuck. And that's one of the things I do like about the ANS community, at least the parts I interact with, is people are generally not very judgmental. And you go, you know what? I'm trying to do this in a more period way. What can I do? Oh, you can do this. And you can go, we all talk about rabbit holes. You don't have to dive head first into the first rabbit hole you find. You can take it slow. You can figure out how deep this is. Maybe you don't want to go that deep. Maybe you're okay at that first bend. Okay, that's fine. You can stay there.
That's really important advice. And somebody had just posted about that on one of the groups that I'm in Facebook about why can't people respect that maybe I don't want to dive too deep and I just want to have this sort of slightly middle level understanding about all of these topics. And it's important that I like we talked about Shakespeare before we went live, right? Like I love Shakespeare and I could talk your ear off about
Mm-hmm.
Shakespeare, but I have to respect the fact that not everybody actually cares about Shakespeare or any medieval theater because I'm more of a mystery cycle person about those things as much as I do. And so I have to be able to elevator pitch Shakespeare to you
Right.
or give you the resources to dive deep yourself. It's not every interaction with people is not a classroom setting.
And to
And
take your, go ahead, Lucas.
and I was going to say, like, for my part, the only class I've ever taught for the SCA, I've been the assistant instructor now several times, is in fight choreography. I'm a certified fight choreographer for stage and for film, and um, but I come to it with a very modern sensibility of I
Sure.
need the thing to look great before it looks period.
Mm-hmm.
In most cases, but I'm knowledgeable now as I kind of take the step back and look at the manuals and learn from people that have been in my life who are super knowledgeable about that rapier style or that broadsword or whatever it is that we're working on. But when I've taught my classes, a lot of times, you know, the people that are in the class are looking for that period experience where I'm coming at it from, can you learn to be safe during the combat first and
Right.
then take the step back? So yeah, I totally get that.
And one of the things I was going to say, so I know you're both performing artists. So everybody doesn't need to be an actor, right? It'd be nice if the audience understood something of what you were doing. So having a little knowledge of Shakespeare is a good thing. But ultimately, you as actors and performers need an audience. You don't need a bunch of actors clamoring to get on stage. So that's the thing with the rabbit hole, right? You can go, I want to be an actor. I want to know everything there is to know about Shakespeare. Okay. I want to know enough so I can appreciate what you guys are doing. And then I can sit back and enjoy what you're presenting to me. And I know I've seen various discussions amongst various SCAdian performers that you don't put on a medieval or a Renaissance play. Our sensibilities as a modern audience, I'm dressed funny, but I'm still a modern person. I'm not going to necessarily find that same joke funny that was written in that play or that particular pratfall. So you put in the modern version, which I'm going to know, and I'm going to get the clue. Oh, I'm supposed to laugh at that because I've seen that on sitcoms. I know that's supposed to be funny. So you do have to be period-like, but not always period, because the modern audience isn't going to get it. And that's
Right.
the other thing with our hobbies. We have modern. I don't have 400-year-old wine to turn into vinegar, and that probably is a shame if I did. So I have to use modern stuff, even though I'm using a period method to make something. And we have to say that's okay.
Right. I do want to go into a different direction and ask you, you did mention that you came to us through Ren fairs.
Mhm.
That's Lucas's entry point as well. Do you still attend Ren fairs?
Not as much, no. So where I am, our closest one is Bristol in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Weekends in the summer, I can go to the SCA event or I can go to Bristol. All my friends are at the SCA event. So sometimes, but not as much as I would like. And there's a big difference, obviously. I mean, in a Ren fair setting, you are mostly the consumer.
Right.
They are there for you, and you can interact with them as little or as much as you'd like. And I find it's entertaining being at an SCA event, but it's not It's not designed as entertainment. It's designed as social or a way to collaborate with, colleagues, to use more modern terms. Or often I'm there. Okay, I know so-and-so, I know Zoph's going to be there. I want to talk to Zoph about this. So I'm going to go to this event and hopefully we'll get 30 minutes and can talk about this thing that we need to talk about. And because of the social nature and all of the friends that I've made, I prefer to go to the SCA event.
Right. One of the questions we ask all of our guests, and I do want to ask this of you, is if you could point out one growth point for the SCA, what would that be?
Boy, I think this goes back to the thing I embarrassed myself about. And we've gotten better. I have to say, it has gotten better since then. Excuse me, goodness. Don't assume that the rules are known. So I'll talk about my So at this Maidens 15 odd years ago, I went to a Bardic circle. My friend knew I sang. I sing in choirs quite a bit. So I go to this Bardic circle, and there were definitely rules that everybody knew except me. And I definitely felt that, certainly by the end of it, I'm like, I really wish I knew what those rules were, because I'm sure I violated several of them. And that's what made me feel anxious and not welcome. And it wasn't that anyone came to me and said, you did it wrong. It was, man, I did not read the social contract very well for this.
Right, and there is none.
Hide.
Yeah, there is no social contract. Nobody hands it to you when you walk
Right.
in the door.
And so I know it's gotten better. I've certainly been to Bardic circles of recent where, you spend the 30 seconds, a minute. This is how we're going to do this. We're all going to go in turn. You can pass if you like. You don't have to do period. Whatever the rules are going to be, it's laid out. So there's no automatic assumption that you should know them. And I think that's one area we should make sure. That'll be more welcoming to new people, because as a new person, you don't know what you should ask. You don't know what you don't know. And unless you get somebody who helps you, you have to try to figure it out. So it doesn't hurt to just spend a small amount of time. Hey, in case we have any new people here, this is the format we're going to do. And if you're confused or have questions, you can ask and we'll help you out. And you're done. Everybody's on the same page now, and then you can go forward.
Right, right. Lucas, questions?
No, I mean, I'm fascinated by that. I just feel like that has been a common theme with
And
us.
it's
Is that,
nature. I mean,
yeah,
you're in a group of all your friends. So the Bardic community is often pretty tight. It's clear that people have known each other for years, decades. Like, we all know this. We're gonna do it, and we're gonna do this. Hey, sing that great song that you always sing. Like, and go, I'm the new guy. I don't know any of these songs.
Yeah.
yeah,
That's the worst. My first Bardic circles that I went to, I don't go to many of them anymore, but everybody started singing along with all the songs. And I'm like, what are you people even saying? I don't even know. What is this song? Like, there's no, it's just by osmosis. You're supposed to know what everybody else is doing.
And I don't mean to be picking on the Bardic people. I love the Bardic people,
No.
as you guys know.
well, I mean, I
Brewers
don't,
love bards, and bards love brewers. That's the way it is.
but I was going to say our very first guest was primarily talked about fighting, and it
Yeah,
was
I know. I took Carrie's course at that rum. That's how I would, if you were going to ask that question, I was going to be like, that's a class I will never forget on Norse mythology. I learned so much just from Carrie's presentation on that. That was
Right.
awesome.
Yeah, me too.
yeah,
It was a great
but he
course.
basically said the same thing, that unless when he walked into that first event, the first thing he thought was, I don't understand this, and he backpedaled out, and then whatnot. And I think that's been a common
Yeah.
a common theme. I mean, I think my advantage over not feeling like that is that until just this year, like I hadn't been an official member, so I always kind of felt on the outskirts anyway. So, going to a thing or being part of a show or whatever it was that I was doing, I always felt like the outsider anyway. So it
Sure.
kind of buffered me against that. Well, I don't know the rules anyway, so, but I'm not really a part. But I totally understand that, and that's
I
Yeah.
think some of that is, and I don't want to make assumptions or broad generalizations, but our group really doesn't have much of a fighter core. And I think people who are doing fighting, because you have those fighter practices that are less formal in terms of an SCA event, they maybe get the rules a little better because they're gradually introduced to them. You're learning how to fight, and this is how you do this, and this is how you would salute your opponent, or this is what you do after you've been defeated to show that you're a good loser or whatever. You learn those rules through the practice sides, and ANS you don't always get that. Depends on how big your group is and what they do. Our group is small, so we didn't really have that.
yeah.
Hmm. Well, maybe that's our next, maybe we should add that to the list, Lucas,
Of the big ones.
of the big shows that we want to do. Um, so Anglo-Saxon, I'm
Yeah.
gonna guess because of your name that's your persona. That's the persona you've gone with. What led you to choose Anglo-Saxon
Sure.
as your persona?
Couple of things, and actually I have 2.5 personae, but they're all named Oswin, so it's easy. Two things. One, my wife and I honeymooned in Bath many years ago. We're bad about remembering how long ago that was. So I've always liked that, but one of the things that got me onto it, I was started listening to podcasts, and was listening to the British History podcast and the History of England and various other ones. And they got on this guy named Alfred the Great. And I'm like, I've never heard of this guy before. Why have I never heard this guy before? I minored in history. Admittedly, it was classical history, but I had some exposure. Why have I not? And I'm like, okay. So I started looking at this guy. I'm like, that's a really interesting story. So going to Bath, loving the history of the place. I'm like, all right, my base persona, Oswin of Bathon, is my 10th century Anglo-Saxon persona. He's my service persona. And so I learned about the history, and there's some really neat and wacky stuff. Just the names, later in history, especially later in history, English history, you don't get things like Edric the Grasper. Just these cool names that the Anglo-Norse people had, because you didn't really have last names, you had descriptors of who you were. And so that really appealed. And then, like I said, I did some history on that. And that gets into, how do you know what you know? How do you know you're a good teacher or not, or whether the person you're asking to teach? It takes a little while to do the history stuff. Crafting is easier, and I mentioned this in the discussion group that we did. If you do a make and take, if you made the thing at the end of the class, you obviously knew what you're doing to make it. Maybe it wasn't the greatest thing, maybe it wasn't a period thing, but this is how you knit. Okay, I knitted something. Okay, you taught me how to knit. That one's an easy. Here's the history of Alfred the Great and how he drove back the Vikings in 837. I have to justify that a little bit more to you than this is just my opinion. So references and bibliography is a way to do that. But I think I'm weird in the fact that I feel the need to have multiple personae. Like I said, I like Tudor England, and working on being a vinegreer is the proper term. That didn't exist in that didn't exist in the 10th century. That wasn't a thing.
So how did they make it in the 10th century?
It existed, but having a
Right, but
merchant who imported, sold, and distributed vinegar, that wasn't the thing. You just made it in your house or whatever, or it would just happen. So that's why I felt, okay, I need another persona to demonstrate this thing. And so Oswin Swan is I haven't decided for sure if he's Tudor or Elizabethan, but somewhere in that 1570 to 15 whatever mix is my other persona. And he's also from Bath.
How do you designate between the two at an event? I mean, is it just by what
dress?
Just dress. Okay.
Yeah. If I'm in something that looks vaguely Elizabethan, then I'm going to be in Oswin Swan more often. You read my blog, and those who have seen my Penzic project that I've been working on over this pandemic.
Yeah.
I was supposed to be working on making the wheelbarrow. My friend is doing most of the work since we can't really be together. But I had this woodcut that I found of a vinegreer, of how they actually distributed vinegar. You had a wheelbarrow and a barrel of vinegar, and you would basically walk through the town shouting in the streets, hey, we've got this stuff. You'd come out with your mug or container, pour it off, and you'd say 9 pence or whatever it was, and you'd be on your way. It was basically a traveling cart that went through the streets, and you got what you wanted from him. So I'm planning on doing that, and I'm going to do that a little bit more as I have barrels of vinegar and the opportunity to do that.
Wow.
Neat. All right.
I mean, with the dual persona, because again, I find my problem is coming to the SCA as an actor, I can always envision myself, I think, playing anything. Do you know what I mean? Like, and I love that. And I have a look, that I court with my hair and everything for Renaissance festivals. It's fun to play at night and look like this. But as far as being an actor is concerned, I kind of felt like, well, I have to play late Tudor Elizabethan in order to kind of really court the actor life. But I am a huge fan of Viking era, kind of things. So I tried to spin that all weirdly into a backstory, on my character, and it's just weird. It just felt like I was doing bad D&D after a while, and
that's probably what I am doing, actually, but that's okay. The essence of your question is, it's one of the reasons I made sure that all of my personae are named Oswin.
Yeah.
So you don't have to guess what's my name today. You see me on the streets, you can just say, hey, Oswin, and it doesn't matter what the last names are. I'm me, and you can interact with me.
Awesome.
And
Right.
if you're not good with identifying clothing, then you don't have to worry about it.
And
And there's
you
lots
can
of people
also-
who do different garb, and they don't change who their persona is. That's the
Right.
normal. I'm not normal. I'm weird. So
And that's what I was going to say. I am Zoph, no matter how I dress, although I try to dress 9th century Hungarian. I will tell stories from later in Hungarian history simply because they're really cool stories, and we don't have as many stories from the 9th century of Hungary. Um, that's really fascinating.
So I'm going to try to keep it to two. I do have a half of one that's more of a sketch, really.
Nice. So everything has failed in this live recording being shared to our page. So
Oh, sorry.
I'm gonna have to just no, I'm sorry that the people waiting to see it are not able to see it.
All
So
three
I
of
will
them.
edit it and this will show up
Yep.
on the page in a little bit, and then
Mhm.
I'll definitely get the YouTube going too. So go ahead, Luke, because I just wanted to let you know where we're at with my technical
This
failings
is, well,
tonight.
no, it's not you. Like I said, I'm not a techie person.
Yeah.
This is the kind of thing that happens.
It really does, and I don't feel well. And I thought I had a Starbucks medicine ball. I thought that would help. Obviously, I'm going to edit all this out. Um, and it
No, leave it
obviously
in.
did not help
Blooper
enough.
reel.
Blooper reel with Zoph. Yeah, my life.
So Oswin, then I
Yeah.
would ask, what's kind of next for you? Like, where do you think you're gonna go? I mean, are you gonna stick with rum as far as being, kind of
So
the
yeah.
driving force in that, or
Um. So my term of chancellor is up in October, and we can talk about it some more. That's fine. I have been involved in the rum, by my count, 6 of the 7.5 years that I've been in the SCA. I was a dean. I was deputy chancellor for 2 separate terms, and then chancellor on my own now. I love rum. I am ready to put that down, have a long nap about it, and then see what happens after that. Like I said, my big thing is I really want to be able to. I'm always looking at, and this is I'm getting stream of consciousness here, but this is kind of where I was going as a rum chancellor before the COVID thing happened. I wanted to show you something. I wanted to do something really neat. We were going to have this Tri-Kingdom University thing in September, and it was, I got Atlantia and we got Meridities on board, and it's like, yeah, we think we have this site and we can have cooking outdoors, and I think we can have equestrian there too, and probably brew there. I'm like, all right, we're going to have this big knockout, drag out, cooperative university thing, and that didn't happen. And that's, hopefully we're going to do something, a riff off of that in the summer virtually. So after that, I want to show you something. That's what this Penzic project is. I want to show you this tiny, not important to anyone but me, part of medieval life. This is what person who made their living making and selling vinegar did, how they did it, what it looked like. I've made all the stuff. I've got, like, I'm working on the wheelbarrow. Now I just need a place to show it to you. that's my thing. So that's the next thing I want to do. Maybe I'll get involved with Penzic University down the road. But in terms of rum, I love it. I'm just ready to take a step back from it and wait for inspiration to strike to see what the next thing is. I'm not going to stop teaching. I'm certainly not going to drop off the face of the earth should the current people need me. But I want it to not be my baby anymore.
So one question I've been wanting to ask you, one of the things that I found is as I moved in the SCA, as I grew as a person in the SCA, and the SCA has anybody who knows the rules, my rules, those rules on becoming a peer will know that I say that me becoming a better person and willing to admit my flaws are all part of that growth. And I found as I grew in the SCA, I grew in in the modern world as well, right? I found myself now in managerial positions that I'm able to do a better job as a manager than I could have done 10 years ago even. How has being in the SCA impacted, because you also teach leadership classes in the SCA, how does being in the SCA reflect in what you teach in and out of the SCA?
Yeah, that's a great point you made. And I would take it a step back because actually my first steps in leadership was being a guild leader for World of Warcraft. These are, and SCA and various hobbies, volunteer things, these are low expectation, low risk ways to get your feet wet, to learn, so what, the raid didn't happen on time. No one died. Everyone's mad at you, but no one lost their job and no one's dead. That's an easy way to go, okay, how do I motivate people to do something? How do I balance the needs of the group versus the needs of the individual? So that's where I got started with making that balance happen. I got better and more comfortable with public speaking through the SCA with teaching. I always wanted to teach. My parents talked me out of that route when I was younger. And so the SCA gave me that opportunity. And like I said, my first class was bad. If I use that as a metric to see whether I should teach again, I would say, no, you should never teach again.
Oh, same. My first class was horrid. Yeah.
But you get this is one of the reasons why we don't really have strict criteria. You get the opportunity to fail and have that net under you. That was a bad class, but you know what? Now you learned what you should do better. And we're going to give you that opportunity to do better. And hey, 3 or 4 times into it, you know what? You're a really good teacher now. You know your stuff, your pacing's good, you've got references, you handle interruption well, you've got it. You're ready to go. So it made me a better speaker, I think. I was not keen on public speaking prior, and then teaching so much in the SCA, I'm like, sure. My CEO calls me up in the middle of a meeting. Sean, you want to talk for a while? I'm like, yeah, sure, absolutely. Try to shut
So you're an improv actor as well. I'm so excited.
Not really, no. I love watching you guys do comedia. I'm horrible at it. I can't stand it. I can talk off the cuff. I just can't get in a character off the cuff.
Gotcha. See, it's easier for me to not be Caroline, right? For me to be Zoph, it's easier for me.
Well, that's another thing with, you were talking about persona and whatnot, and bad D&D. I've role played forever, and in World of Warcraft, my persona and all of my characters that I've been have their own personalities. They're all part of the main personality of the main person, but different aspects come out in different ways. Right. And I've learned the personality that comes out with this guy, I don't like that guy that much. We're not going to do that. Yeah. I like Oswin. Oswin has had a good effect on Sean. So yeah, that's another thing I think gives you the freedom to explore a little bit. What is that persona you are? Who is Zoph? Who is Lucas? When you think about that, like, well, Lucas does this. Like, okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're so awesome. I'm so glad that we had you on the show. You're great. You're like making us think, but we're out of time. So we do not have our guest lined up for 2 weeks from now, but we have a couple leads. Please, 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 everybody, go to our submission form, send us recommendations. We want to talk to people from all over the known world. Froderick wants to hear from people all over the known world. So please use our submission form, and I will post it with the video when I get the YouTube video up and running. Any last words for people? Things like words of wisdom. What are the pearls of wisdom from Oswin?
Jeez. I tend to just let them fall before the swine like they always do. Words of wisdom. There are, in ESCA, that's what we pretty much have right now, there's a lot of things are bad. And there are bad people out there. There are people doing bad things. And I don't want to diminish that. Absolutely there are. There are also good people out there. Try to remember and find those good people, associate with those good people, support each other. That way, hopefully, come summer, fall, if it has to wait until next summer, whichever, all of us good people can get back together, reestablish those friendships, and rebuild and make ourselves even better than we were before. I'll leave you with that.
Thank you so much. Again,
Awesome.
This is Simply SCAdian, no title required, with Lucas and Zoph, and we will be back in 2 weeks with another amazing guest.